asset that I found that was hidden away was a stream of income that had been backdated to be reclassified as a retirement buyout, even though it was actually payment for consultants.
Hi, so following on from our discussions in asset tracing and the series that we've been doing delving deeper into looking for assets globally, I'm joined by Auhom today, who's an associate over in our Hong Kong office. He specialises in divorce, family matters, and estates. So welcome, Auhom.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So excellent. So jumping into some questions that we really just want to focus on in this series. And the first question I'm really going to ask, and it was something that was posed by one of the team when we were discussing, how do we attract clients, and it's really what motivates individuals to initiate asset tracing investigations against their partners when looking to plan or going through a divorce. And I think this is an interesting question. From what I've seen, we get approached a lot of the times before actually the divorce proceedings are initiated, and I think what the party is looking to do is understand what that asset pool looks like. We do see, and not sounding cynical here, but it is very, very common for in during a divorce for assets to be hidden or that asset pool to attempt to be reduced. And we see that probably in more than 50% of cases. So asset tracing becomes a very, very large part of it. And it's very similar to dealing with contentious issues or litigation. You really want to understand what the asset picture looks like before the other party is too warned into the proceedings. And by able to get that picture when a Form E or there is a disclosure during divorce matter, we can then look to compare what we've already found. So I think leading on to that first question with you, Ahom. So beyond simply validating a baseline or the seed information, and that's the information that the client gives us, what does a matrimonial asset tracing investigation actually look like for you when you're digging into it? So over to you there, Ahom.
Of course. So with any with any investigations, the first thing we need to do is check what's already been disclosed in their Form Es, in their financial disclosures. That's really just step one. So that gives us what we do know, but it also gives us an inkling into what we don't know and what we need to know. The real work is figuring out what's not on the page, and that usually comes down to checking the financial flows, the flow of money coming in, the flow of money coming out. If we can trace all these different credits to their respective debits, basically marry up all the different financial transactions. But beyond that, where the human intelligence aspect comes in is seeing who else the subject is connected to and where the money actually went and whether ownership on paper matches who's really in control. A lot of the time, someone will have resigned as a director or handed shares to a relative at exactly the moment it was convenient. Sometimes they can put all of their assets, both present and future, on specific securities, which makes it impossible to, challenge them in court and get all the assets that you duly deserve. We're piecing together a timeline here and a web of connections and cross-checking that against public records, court cases, land registries. So it's not just taking the seed information as one document at face value, but taking it as a part of a broader picture, which is usually not given to us from the get-go, which is something that we have to piece together. And once you do piece it together, you see the different gaps, and usually the gap is where the case is either made or broken.
Excellent, good. And I'm moving on to the next question here. Could you share what hidden assets were uncovered in one of the most recent matrimonial investigations? And I know you've been working on a number in parallel over the last couple of months, so it'd be interesting to hear some examples.
Of course. So with all the asset traces that I've done, I've noticed that all of these fall into a broader pattern that we see over and over. They're usually companies held through someone else's name, property tucked inside a company rather than owned personally, and shares of ownership stakes quietly transferred for next to nothing right around the time of separation. But the most interesting asset that I found that was hidden away was a stream of income that had been backdated to be reclassified as a retirement buyout, even though it was actually payment for consultancy. And what makes it even more interesting is the hidden income and all the payslips were signed by individuals under false names and false credentials. So which made it tracing just by looking at face value very difficult because people would look at the documents and see that, oh, it's it's just, retirement payment, a retirement buyout. However, once you look really into the details, see the stamps of who signed the payslips, you see the nature of the financial arrangements, how they're being paid month in and month out, and also their tax records, you realize that this is an undisclosed source of income, which stood in stark contrast to the given financial position of the subject, who said that he was unemployed and had no source of income.
Excellent. Excellent. I think this just leads on to our last question, and thanks for providing some depth into that, why it's important about investing time and financial resources into asset tracing before a divorce. And we touched on that from the start, and I think it's the planning and preparation stages of this. And from what Ahom's saying here, it isn't in the minority of people hiding their assets and their income around this. This is happening in a lot of the cases that we see, and and our clients come to us because they have an inkling or they have a suspicion. And normally, what happens is when we start digging deeper into the asset picture, into the income picture, into the liabilities, we see this pattern of behavior. That we had a case recently that Ahom works on that we'd seen over the last 4 to 5 years a significant de-investment and de-association with certain assets and businesses. And it was clear that the planning for the divorce or for a financial separation had been going on for a number of years. So therefore, when this suspicion comes around, obtaining this financial picture, understanding what we know, what we don't know, and what we need to know is very, very critical and helps secure that evidence that the client would need, that they can then work with their legal teams to then identify where these hidden assets might be. I think this is a useful discussion in respects of matrimonial matters and estates. During September, we're actually going to be discussing this a lot more, and Ahom's going to rejoin us to talk about some of the other cases that he will have been working on over the last couple of months, more in general terms, to understand some of the patterns and some of the top tips that we can help with this. So thanks again, Ahom, for joining on this session.
Thank you for having me.